Congressman, there's just a report out today that trailing 12 months, because I know you're very focused on this about spending, report out that the trailing 12 months deficit is $2.1 trillion. And the reason is that government expenditures are still about 25% of GDP, but tax revenues have fallen back to historical levels now of 17% because the economy's slowing. And they're projecting the economy is only going to grow 1.1% this year, so the deficit is going to get bigger. You and your colleagues, particularly what I would call the deficit hawks, are people that are really focused on preserving the robust nature of American capitalism. What's the thinking now of the House, of how do we get, given that many of your colleagues kind of gave away the game with giving Biden this debt ceiling, as you predicted, it's going to be far bigger than a $4 trillion added deficit. The thinking of you and your colleagues that are really put foremost the nation's economy, the nation's balance sheet, the health of our economy for future generations. What's your guys thinking now?
Well, the debt is an existential threat to our republic. We must get it under control because the plaque in our arteries is growing, and eventually we will have a heart attack. Regardless of what you want to call it, a shutdown, a default, what you want to call it, we will have a severe experience. Now, I will tell you, we are committed to this because, frankly, of the last 22 years, Republicans have held a majority in the House of Representatives for 16 years, 16 out of the last 22 years. That's the same time period that our deficit has grown from 10 trillion to 32 trillion. We've held a majority in the House more than 2/3 of the time during that time period from 10 trillion to $32 trillion. That's what this Republican majority and this small group of conservatives is committed to stopping.
I just want to go back. When you say, for someone like you who's, you're not a fire breather, when you say, given, the Chinese Communist Party threat, given your service to your country, given you come from West Point, when you say the debt's an existential threat, and I know the Democrats don't think this, so they want to keep going this heretical. Are there members of this conference that don't agree with you, that don't understand that this is now maybe our biggest national security threat is ourselves in the printing of this money and the running up of debt? Are there members of your conference that think that don't agree with you, don't get that?
Well, I will say that I put it this way. There are people that are philosophically conservative. They will say that they're conservative. They will opine that they are conservative, but operationally, they are not willing to make the hard decisions to be conservative, because a conservative does not run up $4 trillion in debt over 19 months. That is not a conservative position. I'm not going to characterize my colleagues in the House, but I will just say that is not a conservative position.
Going forward, how are we going to rectify this? What's your recommendation? A lot of people know you've been on the show, follow you, understand your thinking. What's your action plan? How do we try to get people to say the conservative to start to, because the times of easy decisions are in back of us. We have nothing but hard calls, but we got to start making those hard calls. So what would be your recommendation?
Well, I will ask people to continue to contact your representatives, because I hear from several of my colleagues who made yes votes on the debt ceiling bill. They're getting a lot of calls from their constituents. I encourage you to continue to do that. Now, going forward, which was your question, we've got to make use of the appropriations process. We've got to set a top line. We've got to hold to it. We've got to make sure that we don't have rescissions that we make and then backfill spending with those rescissions. That's one of the keys, because right now I think the plan is to, yes, we can tell the American people that we have made a rescission of a certain amount of money, but then if we hold it to simply backfill this spending, we haven't done anything. So we've got to make sure that we set a good top line and that we hold to it. So the appropriations process is our next opportunity to make the changes that we need to in the spending, the out of control spending.
Do you think that, given that leadership waved off from the debt ceiling, do you think you feel now that they understand the gravity of the situation. So come about 100 days. If you go through regular order, this will all come up in mid-September. Of course, the Senate's not going to agree, but this will come down to, the run up to 30 September, the end of the fiscal year. This will be another showdown. Do you think people have the moral fortitude and courage to force Biden to shut down the government or just go to another CR and another omnibus? Or do you think your colleagues now understand the gravity of the situation in this moment in American history?
I don't know, Steve. I honestly do not know. I will tell you that I do hear some pessimism that we're simply headed for a showdown, maybe a shutdown, maybe a CR, maybe an omnibus. We've said no omnibuses, but you know how that can change. So I honestly don't know the answer to your question, but I will tell you this is serious. We need to get serious about the spending from the federal government, or we will just continue to add to that debt, and eventually something will crash.